Penn State fans, Bob Flounders here with Johnny McGonigal. It is Monday, early Monday afternoon. We just heard from James Franklin. We were talking off camera and before the podcast. A lot of news, Johnny McGonigal, to get to. But I got to start with this, man. What's your favorite kind of turkey? Because that's what James Franklin wanted to know. And then we're going to get right into the news.
He was asking, it's the classic Thanksgiving week, James Franklin press conference where, he asks every media member a different question, either or, on Thanksgiving. Personally, I'm a white meat guy for turkey, but at the same time, I like ham more than turkey. I'm not a huge turkey guy to begin with. For me, it's more ham, mashed potatoes, corn, all that kind of good stuff.
Johnny, I respect your willingness to go where others don't go in another direction. I think that's bold and brave of you. Are you going to ask me what my favorite kind is?
I am. I will add one more thing. The ham has to be on a Hawaiian roll. The little Hawaiian rolls, those things slap. I love those things. All right, Bob, what do you got?
All right, officially ask me the question.
Which kind of turkey do you prefer?
Wild. Am I right? Am I right?
I mean, I shouldn't have been surprised by that answer at all.
Yeah. If James Franklin ever asked me, I'm just going to be honest, and that is my answer. It's wild turkey. All right, guys. Moving right along. All right, there was a lot of news. We could start a lot of different places. I just think I think the Penn State fans, I think the news involving the health of Anthony Donkoh, I think is probably where we should start. I think anyone who saw the game, we were there. He went down, and he went down like it was something significant on the second snap, I believe. He was on crutches. He was kind of helped off the field, went into the locker room, had to watch the remaining game on crutches. Nolan Rucci filled in for him. We can talk about that too. But Johnny, the update on Anthony Donkoh just isn't very good.
It's not, Bob. Yeah, we'll start this podcast off with the bad news coming out of James Franklin's press conference, which is that Anthony Donkoh, starting right tackle, is dealing with a long-term injury. Not necessarily surprised, like you mentioned, Bob, with the way he went down, the way he had to be helped off the field, carted into the locker room, comes out on crutches. Just not a good scene for Anthony Donkoh, who I thought was playing really well this year at right tackle, taking over that spot from Caden Wallace after Wallace went to the NFL following last season. And, we saw those early signs in the Peach Bowl last year of Donkoh, who's a redshirt freshman now this year, and what he could do. And I thought he lived up to that standard this year and played pretty well over there on the right side. And losing him now it is a difficult blow for this Penn State offense. Nolan Rucci, that's why you go out and get him. The Wisconsin transfer, former Warwick standout and former five-star guy. But there's also a reason why Anthony Donkoh was starting ahead of him and after beating him out in preseason camp and holding down that spot throughout the year. So, Rucci's a veteran, a guy who, you'd rather have him than not have him on the roster, for depth, perspective and, to now have him step in. But, James Franklin, when talking about Nolan Rucci, said that, not just with Rucci, but with the offensive line as a whole, that, you could look at 20 plays and be impressed. And then you have a couple plays that are just really frustrating. And, I think we've seen that in pass pro specifically with Nolan Rucci this year. And so, it's going to be interesting to see, how they might switch up pass protections, not just this weekend against Maryland, but looking ahead to the college football playoff.
Yeah, there was a follow-up later in his news conference about, hey, so if Nolan Rucci, who was your swing tackle, is going to be the starter and you're not going to have Donkoh available, what does that mean for who could be the swing tackle? You mentioned J.B. Nelson, significant because he could play guard or tackle, but he also acknowledged that he's been dealing with multiple injury issues, and he hasn't always been available for Penn State this season. With Penn State ready to go or prepping to play Maryland, a pretty bad Maryland team, by the way, on Saturday, senior day. That sounds like that's going to be the third man in if they need some. He mentioned some other players too. It's a big game for Penn State. I don't know how many tackles they're going to use unless the game gets out of hand. But the third man in, if anything happened to Nolan Rucci or Drew Shelton, looks like it would be JB Nelson. Johnny, one other injury note. I think it's a little bit of a key under the radar injury because I think the guy was playing pretty well the last couple of weeks. Alonzo Ford left the Minnesota game, Penn State's win, and he did not return. He's also got a long-term injury. The defensive line has been playing very well, but they've had to deal with some injuries and some players no longer with the program. And I do think, especially, if this team gets to the playoff, defensive line depth and Donkoh's injury, they have to be concerns, I think, for Penn State.
Definitely, yeah. Alonzo Ford, out for again probably at this point in the season, a long-term injury with one regular season game left. It is a difficult blow. Like, he's not a starter, but he has been playing really well recently as a rotational piece on that interior defensive line. Alonzo Ford transferring in ahead of last season from Old Dominion.
Yeah.
We didn't see him last year because he was dealing with an injury, but him working his way into the rotation this year, I thought he played well when given the opportunity. He's also a really a liked guy in the locker room, a big personality, a guy that guys gravitate towards. It sounds, Bob, that you've got someone ringing your doorbell right now.
That's not me.
That's not you?
It's definitely not me, no.
Oh, is that me? That might be me.
It's you.
That might be me.
There's an intruder in my house. I didn't know that. No, there's no.
I'm going to open the door and a stranger's going to be outside. Anyway, back to Alonzo Ford. An unfortunate situation for him, but I do think Penn State has the depth and the starters with Zane Durant, Devon J. Thomas, Keziah Izzard, losing Hakeem Beamon, leaving the team a couple weeks back, I think plays into this a little bit more too in terms of the lack of depth. But I still think the front end talent is good enough to get by for Penn State's defensive line, but still an unfortunate situation for Alonzo Ford.
Yeah. James rehashed the Minnesota game. He talked a little bit about Maryland. I think Penn State fans realize this isn't a Maryland preview. It is Thanksgiving week. Penn State fans, it's a short week. So we're going to have a couple more podcasts, a lot of news on PennLive. We're probably going to bump them up just because, Johnny, I don't know about you. I don't think we're going to be doing any recording on Turkey Day. There's too many things to get to. So they might actually come up a little bit earlier. You can look forward to those. But he talked a little bit about Maryland, but there was really, the news was more significant, just I think, and what James had to say about some other things. He talked about kind of how Nick Singleton is starting to look like his old self. He admitted he's healthier, right? And we've seen it. I thought he looked really good. He was really the guy in the running game against Minnesota. As a receiver and as a rusher, he had a rushing touchdown. We could start there, Johnny. I also want to get to – I really enjoyed James's you wrote about the fake punt on PennLive, right after it happened. It was one of the biggest plays in the game, one of the biggest plays of Penn State's season because it worked. But he talked about all the things that kind of went into that. It wasn't just Luke Reynolds, really, who, running for 32 yards. There was a lot happening to make that play successful. He was also asked, I thought it was a pretty interesting answer about, before he called the play, did he worry at all? Did he worry at all about what the media might think or what fans might think or write, what media might write and what the fans would think if it didn't work? I thought that was a pretty interesting answer that he had. But where do you want to go next?
Let's start with Nick, because I feel like, he's a guy that a lot of fans have talked about and have wondered about, this year. And we've written about him a good bit, considering that he's one of the best players on the team, one of the highest rated players on the team, a guy who could very well leave after this season for the NFL draft. And we've seen him hampered this year. He missed that UCLA game. He got beat up the week before against Illinois. And the couple of weeks after that, he hadn't really looked like his normal self. 10 carries for 26 yards at USC, not much of a factor against Ohio State. And so it's like, okay, well, when are we going to get the real Nick Singleton back here and him hitting, on all cylinders and running and catching the ball and being as fluid and as explosive as he can be? Well, I think we did see that a good bit at Minnesota, and really in that second half too, once he got going. He finished with 100 total scrimmage yards, 63 rushing, 37 receiving. You mentioned that touchdown. Also, a key play in that game was when on 3rd and 10, I believe it was, he had that 9-yard rush to set up the 4th and 1 that Penn State could go for and ultimately convert and ice the game. And I thought the burst and the vision and everything on that play from Nick, almost getting that first down, but setting up Penn State to seal the win, I thought was a big moment for him and a big moment for this team, and a big moment for the running game moving forward, which you still want to see more of. You want to see Katron Allen a little bit more involved. He didn't get the ball, and a carry until the second half against Minnesota. So you want to see more strides and more improvement in that area, especially, again, as we look towards a potential first-round college football playoff game or a Big Ten title game, which we can talk about that in a bit, Bob. But I think it was a good sign for Nick Singleton, his game against Minnesota, and hopefully for him, good things to come.
Yeah, Johnny, we might as well talk. Let's just go right into it. So Penn State and Maryland, 3:30 kickoff, big noon game. No surprise it's going to be, I'm thinking it's Ohio State, Michigan. I don't know why it wouldn't be, but I'm sure Penn State fans are going to be paying attention to that game. I know we will. If I believe I have this right, but you correct me. If Michigan would surprise Ohio State, I think it's in Columbus. That means that the Nittany Lions have an excellent chance to get to the Big Ten title game against Oregon if they take care of business against Maryland. So James was asked about that and whether or not, and he I kind of thought he would say it the way he said it, but he was asked kind of about the big picture, Penn State and maybe getting to Indianapolis.
Sorry, Bob, you cut out there for a second, but maybe. So
yeah. I was just saying, James was asked about the Big Ten title game and getting there, and if Michigan beats Ohio State, that would be the scenario, and I'm sure Penn State fans are going to keep a close eye on that game.
Definitely, So the scenario as it stands, it's cut and dry. If Michigan beats Ohio State and Penn State beats Maryland, Penn State is going to the Big Ten title game to face Oregon. I've worked out the tiebreakers. If that happens, Ohio State
is tiebreaker number 112A or is it 112B, Johnny?
It's only number 4. So if I'll explain it quickly and succinctly, hopefully. If Ohio State loses to Michigan, they have 2 Big Ten losses. They're out. It would be between Penn State and Indiana. The 4th tiebreaker, the first 3 tiebreakers are washes. The 4th tiebreaker is cumulative opponent conference record. So the teams that Penn State played in Big Ten play, their combined conference record, and the same deal with Indiana. That winning percentage is insurmountable for Indiana's different opponents. Like that difference cannot be made up in the last week of the Big Ten season. So if Ohio State loses to Michigan and Penn State beats Maryland, they are going to the Big Ten title game. Now, James Franklin was asked about this at his Monday press conference because there's been a debate that's been going on, between even it's extended to coaches because Lane Kiffin brought it up last week, the head coach for Ole Miss, but really amongst fan bases of, do you want to make the conference championship game?
Yeah.
Are the risks of potential injury and really of losing and then possibly affecting your standing in the college football playoff, whether you're a 2-loss team getting knocked out completely or a 1-loss team potentially losing a home playoff game in Penn State's case, do those risks outweigh the reward of winning and, obviously having the memories of winning a conference title and then also getting that first round bye in the CFP? And so James was asked about that, like weighing the pros and cons. And he said they would be very, very excited to have the opportunity to play in the Big Ten title. They want to play as many games as they can this year. Personally, I agree with his thinking. I don't know how you think, Bob, but I know that some fans, are writing off the Big Ten title game and don't even want to get there, and are going to be rooting for Ohio State this weekend. Like I get the sentiment, but James Franklin is in the same camp I'm in, and a lot of other people are.
Can't be scared of competition, man. It's just not. You just can't be. You have to embrace it. Hey, it's dangerous getting out of bed in the morning, Johnny. You know it, I know it. So I think that's the right message that James sent. I also think there should be a tiebreaker in the Big Ten where if it gets close enough, maybe the 2 teams involved, they can have the head coaches arm wrestle for it, because that seems like a pretty good way, I think, to decide things. But Johnny, back to the fake punt just real quick. James was asked about media reaction, fan reaction if it doesn't work. I mean, he said exactly what he needed to say. Like, he never crossed his mind. If it works, he's a hero. If it doesn't work, They're going to, instead of talking about roasting turkey, and all that stuff, they're going to be roasting him. It was exactly the right thing to say. But I did want to focus just upon. I like that he shined a light. Like after the game, he shined a light on Dom Ruley and his role. And it wasn't just him and Reynolds. Some people threw some really, really key blocks to make all of it happen. Dakari Nelson won. Tyler Elsdon. I think he also gave some credit to Cooper Cousins. So it was nice to see him kind of single out some of the guys that really made that play work. Kind of, in addition to Luke.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, he gave Dom Ruley his flowers after the game, at Minnesota. A lot of teammates did as well. Nick Dawkins, Tyler Warren, the list went on of guys praising Dom Ruley, who's the personal protector there. But also, I think I showed you in the press box when we were watching it back, the block that Tyler Elsdon had. James Franklin brought up Dakari Nelson having a really big block on that play as well. And just, James talking about, when teams, like when a team works on a play like that for so long, that fake punt had been in the mix, since training camp, that they've been working on that, and they had called it, 6 times or so, half a dozen times this year, and Dom Ruley checked them out of it because the look wasn't favorable. And so for everything to happen in unison and work the way you want it to work, there were some special teams blunders early in that game. So that's that's ultimately on the players who made those mistakes, but also on Justin Lustig, the special teams coordinator. But it working, the fake punt working the way it did. Also credit to Justin Lustig and those special teams players that they were prepared for that moment. They met that moment. They went on to convert 2 more 4th downs to end the game. And look, whatever it takes to win, right, Bob? Whatever it takes. If it takes a fake punt, it takes a fake punt, because at this point where Penn State is, they just needed to keep winning. You saw Ole Miss lose, you saw Bama lose, you saw all these teams. Colorado lost. Like these teams with conference championship hopes and college football playoff hopes were dropping like flies on Saturday, and Penn State survived. And whatever way they need to get it done, they got it done.
Yeah, real quick here on the blue-white breakdown. We got some other stuff to get to, but just check out all of our podcasts, Johnny and me, Max and me, Johnny and Max. It's going to be a busy week. It's going to fly by. I had to talk about this real quick with you. I was, Abdul Carter and Denai Dennis Sutton are terrific talents. I was super impressed with 2 defensive linemen in Penn State, Minnesota game. One was Zane Durant, but man, how about Anthony Smith, the kid from Shippensburg? And he decimated, he destroyed at times Penn State's offensive line. He played at Shippensburg. I think if he was playing on a more high-profile team, if you look at his numbers, he's fantastic. Big dude, 6'6", 280. PennLive's, I think he was PennLive's Athlete of the Year a couple of years ago. He's a fantastic player. He's got a big future in the NFL, but so does Zane Durant. Those 2 were really, really good in that game, and Zane Durant's been good all year.
Yeah, Smith was really good. I saw actually a video from the post game, handshake, midfield kind of area. Our Joe Hermit was out there with his video camera and got Anthony Smith talking about Harrisburg and PennLive and all that good stuff. So great work as always from our guy Joe. And on Zane Durant, again, he's a guy that we've talked about all year. He's a guy who's been showing up not just in the stat sheet but just on film. Wrecking games and destroying offensive guards and centers. Like he's just been a nightmare on the interior for opposing offensive lines to deal with. And no bigger or better example of that was Saturday at Minnesota with 2.5 tackles for loss, and it felt like a hell of a lot more. I mean, Zane Durant, we talk about Nick Singleton potentially going to the NFL. Abdul Carter is going to be off to the NFL. Like a lot of these guys from this team have NFL futures. Man, Zane Durant's going to make an NFL team very happy if he decides to declare and ultimately leave for the NFL draft in April.
Yeah, there have been some good Penn State defensive linemen during James Franklin's time, especially at rush end, but defensive tackle. The guy that he's so disruptive, Zane is, the guy that he brings to mind is Anthony Zettel. He was another, in 2014, his numbers in 15, he was just an incredible player. But Zane Durant has really, really come a long way in 3 years. Kudos to him. Johnny, great talking with you. Congratulations to your Philadelphia Eagles and that Saquon Barkley, the Penn State great, who just tore up the Rams and ruined my fantasy game. I had it won. All I had was he just had to be like a mere mortal, and he turned into Superman again, like he did at Iowa. Congratulations to you. Saquon, you killed my fantasy team, but I'm happy for you. Johnny, always a pleasure chatting with you, and we will be talking again soon.